Alright everyone, welcome to another EDH Deck Tech. Going to be pumping out a few of these. It's been a long time, there's been a lot of change, and yeah. So this is Neheb. I always keep, I try to always keep a mono red general, and this is my dude. Super excited, we got some new spicy meatballs in the new set, especially for red. There's not a lot of generals that I really am a fan of and that are also socially acceptable, to be honest. So this deck's going to be Neheb. The take I did on it is Eldrazi. We're essentially using all of the mana we net from post-combat to cheat out big, scary things. Now, Eldrazi's overdone a bit, I will admit, but for mono red, it solves pretty much all of the issues. The two main issues mono red has is draw and exiling permanents. It does a good job with creatures, but enchantments it has a very tough time with, same with planeswalkers. So it solves the issues. It does what Neheb wants, which is a lot of damage, and so I've very much gone away from the Spellslinger builds of Neheb, which are more common. This is an honest deck, and we're doing combat damage, and we're trying to make our opponents play honest as well. So without further ado, let's get into it. We're going to start out with the enchantments. First up, we have Hammer of Perthros. It's very important in this deck that our creatures have haste, because if we're investing our turn in playing big Eldrazi, we want to at least get a swing in as well as the cast triggers before they're removed. They're high threat targets, so they will be removed quickly. Oh, also a note on the sleeves, if they look a little scuffed up, these are actually my practice sleeves. I just, any deck that's in transition goes in these sleeves, so yeah, they're a little dirty, but oh well. Price of Glory, this is one way we keep our opponents honest. Whenever a player taps a land for mana during another player's turn, destroy that land. Essentially, no one's interacting on your turn, and you can drop your Eldrazi and get your swing in. War's Toll's another way of doing that. When an opponent taps a land, they tap all their lands, and when they attack with a creature, they attack all their with all their creatures. So it's a good way of dissuading them. Bloodmoon, we kind of got to run a Bloodmoon. There's just there's too many ways to deal with red, and so I figured, rather than land destruction, we'll just settle for a Bloodmoon. Next up is Repercussion. This is a monster in the deck. If I do still run a few like earthquake effects. So if we have this out, we generally only have 2-3 creatures that are very strong, very powerful. If our opponent's playing tokens or at least has 5-6 creatures, we can just kill them off a big earthquake with Repercussion in play. Aggravated Assault, this is the only way the deck actually goes infinite. We get infinite combat phases with this card. And it's pretty easy to do. I'm not going to lie, there have been in test play a few turn 4 with Neheb triggers. Remember that every time you activate this, it's cumulative. So the damage you did on the previous combat phase still counts and is added to your mana pool when Neheb is in play post-combat. So it gets out of hand real quick, and you only need 5 to go infinite. Sulfuric Vortex, we have to lock players out of gaining life. It's the traditional bane of red is when an opponent has too much life and you can't deal with them. Pyrohemia is a great card in the deck. Neheb is a 4/6, so he can survive a lot. I've won games just with Neheb and Pyrohemia and just burning the board until Neheb has 1 or 2 toughness, and then coming in for a swing, getting a ton of mana off of the post-combat, and yeah, casting some nasty spells. Stranglehold, your opponents can't search and can't take extra turns. Very simple, very effective. So that's sort of the setup to keep them honest. Now we're going to go into the creatures. This is all about the power. So Generator Servant, great card. Sacks to add 2 mana to, and if it's used to cast a creature spell, the creature gains haste. So this is great. That's turn 3 Neheb or an Eldrazi that just goes in. Magus of the Wheel, great in the deck because there are a lot of haste enablers. I can usually wheel for 5 with him. Otherwise, I can keep him for a block and block sack. Urbras the hidden. Your creatures have haste. Your opponent's creatures enter the field tapped. Again, we need haste. And this is also good at getting in. If their creatures are tapped, then there's more opportunity for us. Stormbreath Dragon is a little off theme, but there's not really any Eldrazi with flying that are high CMC that we're running. So I figured I'd add him in. He's really perfect in the deck. He has haste, so if Neheb's already in play, you can play him swing, net back the 4 mana. And really you've only paid 1 for your dragon, which is pretty cool. And the monstrosity ability is deadly. If you resolve that before combat or during combat, you're generally going to net a ton of mana. Speaking of netting a ton of mana, Heartless Hidetsugu, honestly my favorite general in red, but I had to disassemble the deck because it is far too mean to just do double damage and put your opponent at an even life total beforehand, and then you just kill them. So I had to disassemble the deck, but I do get to run him here because he works so well. This is all mana that will be added to your mana pool, and you can pretty much play your hand if this happens. Solemn, pretty standard, pretty boring, but good. So he's here. Steel Hawkite. Yeah, I feel like this is pretty much a staple for mono red. They need the flyers, they need the permanent destruction, and so he's in here. We can also sink a bunch of mana in, and essentially it becomes fire breathing post combat. But you're also getting the additional bonus of the 5 damage on top of that, so it's pretty good. Now we're going to get into the Eldrazi package. Conduit of Ruin is maybe my favorite Eldrazi. It's so useful. Essentially you get 1 commander tax free, like deducted, because he makes the first creature spell you cast each turn cost 2 less. So that applies to your commander as well. But also the tutor effect. I mean, if you get him out a little bit early with some ramp, you're set up. Your game is already set up. Void Winnower. I love this sort of awkward control that this brings to the table. It's also a 11/9. Which is nothing to scoff at, and for 9 mana, it's really what more could you ask for? It That Betrays, we do run the Annihilator Eldrazi, so if we do resolve an It That Betrays and it gets in, it gets nasty. Very expensive card, CMC wise, and so I don't hit it a lot. I would actually generally discard this and hope to hit an Artisan of Kozilek to reanimate it. Kozilek Butcher of Truth. I'm sure you guys know this by now. It's absolutely ridiculous. For 10 mana you get a 12/12, draws you 4 cards, Annihilator 4, it goes in the yard, you shuffle it up. Now we play a lot of wheel effects, so these shuffles actually do a lot for us. Our library is usually pretty full all the time. Ulamog. Yeah, the old Ulamog destroys a permanent, does not exile, notably. The new one exiles 2, this one destroys 1, but it has Annihilator 4 and is indestructible and has the shuffle clause. So that's an 11 cast 10/10. Great beater. We run Emrakul. We do get a few cards in our yard, but normally we cast it for about 10. I'd say 3 permanent types is reasonable by the time we want to cast an Emrakul. And this again is a huge flying beater. You get a really cool little mind control effect on your opponent, and yeah, I really like this card. It's a lot of fun. Ulamog Ceaseless Hunger. This is the one that exiles. Again, we're solving that permanent issue, and Kozilek is solving the draw issue. So I'm sure you're all familiar with that one. Classic shenanigans. The Artisan of Kozilek, this is a huge value play because of all the wheel effects. If we wheel and then hit the Artisan and we still have some Eldrazi in our graveyard, playing this and getting out any of the other Eldrazi is a huge tempo play. Final Eldrazi is the Kozilek the Great Distortion. It's a very cool underrated card. I'm going to say that right off the bat. Especially in black, I love it. It's primarily because of the counter, the access to counter magic you gain when you play him. discard a card with converted mana cost X, counter target spell with converted mana cost X, right? So in black, you have Necropodes, you have a bunch of stuff. In here, we have wheel effects. So, and I do run a Mind's Eye so I can get above 7 cards in my hand. That is the only problem with wheel effects, is you're kind of locked into 7. You have a full hand, but it's about 7. So Mind's Eye is a way to get around, to get above that. Moving on to the spells. This is sort of the flex package on my spells that interacts with Neheb. There's only about 4 or 5 of them, I believe. And so the classic Neheb thing is you do, 3 damage to each player. If you're playing 2 opponents, that's 6 mana with Neheb in play. If you're playing 3 opponents, that's 9 mana with Neheb in play. So this gets out of control really quick, and you cheat your Eldrazi in super fast. Fiery Confluence is the second one. This is just super versatile, but you can hit your opponents for up to 6 each. So with only 2 opponents, you're netting 12 mana, and that's pretty much any Eldrazi you want. Yeah, it's absolutely devastating when that resolves and Neheb's in play. Rolling Earthquake, X damage to each creature without horsemanship and each player. It's better than Earthquake in that horsemanship obviously is less common than flying, so you're pretty much hitting the board. In very rare cases it will be a horsemanship creature, but generally you're hitting the board and you're hitting all players, so you're netting a ton of mana off that when they have in play. Earthquake is the other one. I got this dope old art because I didn't know it existed until I was looking through what I was going to pick up for the deck, and I'm not going to play any other Earthquake ever again. I just freaking love that art. Vandal Blast, Hose and all those artifacts. Yeah, we need a little bit of control, Filtering, we have the Cathartic Reunion and the Tormenting Voice. This is just a pitch and draw. It becomes very clear what the game plan for this deck is, and so depending on what point you are in the game, you pretty much just filter for what you need. Chaos Warp deals with a permanent. It's a decent card. Anger of the Gods. This is important because it doesn't hit players, but it exiles the creatures it kills. It's not going to kill anything on my side of the board. The only thing it could potentially kill is the Solemn Simulacrum, which is a non-bow, but I'd rather, if I'm playing a Mirren deck, or Marin deck, or any other deck that plays a lot of low-casting creatures with ETBs or recurable abilities or graveyard shenanigans, that's when you play Anger of the Gods. You want to exile those all, remove all that value, and soldier on. Seize the Day, we do run, do I have the, yes, okay, so Seize the Day and Fury of the Horde. These are the 2 cards that are going to net us extra combat. Seize the Day is only 1 creature, but it has flashback. So an early Aggravated Assault with a Seize the Day ends the game super quick, but it doesn't happen often, and Neheb is a fragile general. You have to keep in mind, if you're building around Neheb with all these spells that profit off of him, you have to put a lot of protection for your Neheb in, and you're running red, so it's very hard. You kind of got to do it with the equipment, and I just don't find it super reliable. When it works, it works, but I'm happier with this build, honestly. Fury of the Horde is an extra combat step for everything, so this is a win con when we've wheeled into it and we already have some Eldrazi on the board. Then we just remove a couple cards from our hand, go in again, add more mana, blah blah blah. Ignorant Bliss, wanted to play this for a while. It's a very good card with wheel effects because you keep your hand, you discard your hand, but really it's face down, right? So then you draw 7 at the end of the turn, you get back everything you already had in your hand, and now you got this nice big hand and tons of options. It's also great against hand attack. If someone plays like a Sire of Insanity and you got it on the end of their turn and you're next up, you can dodge it for a turn, or there's a lot of other things that make you discard. It's a cool card, and it replaces itself. So if nothing else, you filter it. Winds of Change is the only one that doesn't work with Ignorant Bliss because you shuffle them. But it's 1 to cast, it's good. I usually play a Winds of Change when I have 4 or 5 cards in my hand, and I'm setting up for the next phase of the game. Let's say I have my mid game set up down, I've got some rocks, I've got one Eldrazi, and my hand is just more of the same, then I'm going to try and find some more Eldrazi. Wheel of Fortune is the classic wheel effect. Reforge the Soul is 2 with the Miracle. We don't have like a Scroll Rack or a Sensei's Divining Top, but it's still worth the effect. Hour of Devastation, this was really printed to work with Neheb, quite honestly. Because it does 5 to each creature and non-bolus Planeswalker, that means Neheb's going to be at 1. So it smashes everything, it kills Indestructible, but Neheb lives through it. So if you resolve this early, chances are you can get in with the Neheb after playing it. Faithless Looting, a little more filter. Oh, there's a card stuck behind it. Seething Song, that's turn 3 Neheb. Simple as that. It's good play. Gamble. Yep, this is the red tutor. You got to discard a card at random. So generally you want to kind of have a game plan and a few cards in your hand and then play this and yeah, roll the dice. Really, after that point, you play it, you get what you want, and then you roll the dice and see what happens. Blasphemous Act. Blasphemous Act with Repercussion. That's how the game ends real fast. Mana Geyser. Personal favorite. You add a red for each tapped land your opponents control. So you're playing a big game, you net a ton of mana, you cast some Eldrazi. It's good times. It's good times. Moving in the artifacts, we'll start with the little bit of ramp and fix-in. So we got the Expedition map, pretty standard. We've got a Mana Vault, that's turn 2 Neheb, which is very powerful. We've got a Commanded Sphere. This is mostly, you know, there's a lot of rocks you can run, but being able to sack draw is really good in this deck. Red has problems with draw, even with all these wheel effects. So, you know, I can tap it to add it for mana and then sack it instantly. Float them at land. Hedron Archive, same concept. It's 4 taps to add 2, but I can tap to sack it, draw 2. So, you know, it's like modes of the game, right? If it's late game and I don't need mana, I need 2 cards. Soul Ring, it's pretty boring. Fire Diamond, I really just love the old Mirage Diamonds. Yeah, personal preference. Mind Stone, classic. Mind's Eye, this is what I was talking about earlier. Whenever an opponent draws a card, you may pay 1. If you do, draw a card. This keeps you in the game. This is a really important card for red. It should be in more red decks, I do believe. It's not super competitive, but at the same time, you're playing with a bunch of friends. It'll get you there. Torpor Orb. So you noticed, you may have noticed that Eldrazi trigger when they are cast, not when they enter the battlefield. So they get around Torpor Orb. Literally, the only creature that can fizzle with this is my Solemn Simulacrum. So I thought I'd run it. There's a lot of decks that, like Brago, that really play off of ETBs. Relic of Progenitus, this is me being a little bit responsible. The problem with running a ton of wheel effects is that there are a lot of decks that profit off of a big graveyard. So we have to run the Relic, 2 exile yards, because otherwise you can end up losing the game just by playing it out. You're helping your opponent by wheeling, you know. Swiftfoot Boots, Swiftfoot Boots, and there's a Lightning Greaves. We got to give our creatures haste, and we need them to be protected. Again, they have to go in the turn they're played, or else we lose a lot of the value, usually. Anvil of Bogarden is a really good card in a lot of decks, especially colors that have trouble drawing or want to play off the yard. Everyone skips their discard phase and draws an extra card at the beginning of their upkeep, or sorry, at the beginning of their draw phase, and then discards a card. Defense Grid is more of the you do stuff on your turn, I do stuff on mine. During each player's turn, spells played by another player cost an additional 3. It's 2 to cast, really great to get down early, and lets you get in with your Eldrazi and your Neheb. There's the Lightning Greaves. And finally, we're just onto the lands. So, personal favorite, again, is a Glacial Chasm. Like I said, red has a lot of issues in EDH, and sometimes you just need to, you know, pay like 8 life or whatever and stall the game for 3 turns and see what you can muster in that time. Seagate Wreckage, this is a great card when you're gassed. We are playing, there's a good amount of non-basics in here for 2 reasons. 1, we're monocolored and we can afford to do it, and 2, because Kozilek, the Great Distortion, actually requires the colorless mana. So this is a great card. Once you're gassed, you can draw a card for 3. We've got the Eye of Ugin. Yeah, it gets really gross. The reason why this is so good in Neheb is paying 7 isn't actually that big of a deal once you have your engine rolling. You go into post-combat, and there's times where you can search up an Eldrazi and play it same turn. So it's pretty nuts. It's pretty nuts. Ancient Tomb adds 2 colorless, hits us for 2. Again, we just want to get to mid-game as quick as possible. We want to get to 5 mana as fast as possible. Play our Neheb, start playing our cheaper Eldrazi, setting up our enchantments and going off. Buried Rune returns an artifact. You saw there was a good amount of artifacts that sack to draw, and some other useful utility ones that we can recur if we're against specific matchups. Myriad Landscape's good. We do run a Valakut as usual, so that's 2 triggers if it resolves, which is nice. I do like that. Eldrazi Temple, you know, classic Eldrazi shenanigans. We can add 2 for colorless Eldrazi spells. Shrine of the Forsaken Gods lets us add 2 if we control 7 or more lands, and that 2 can only be used for colorless spells. Yeah. Tower of the Magistrate. This is an underused card. It's really good in mono red, specifically for swords. We're not running any swords, but for 1 and tap it, target creature gains protection from artifacts until end of turn. That means all equipments attached to that creature will fall off. So if someone is playing a, you know, Sword of War and Peace and would normally just be tearing us to bits if we haven't got our Eldrazi out yet, we can use Tower of the Magistrate to have the swords fall off, or we can use it on a variety of other equipment, but that's pretty much what it's there for. Homeward Path kind of has to be in the deck because we're so susceptible to people stealing our creatures. Klepto decks are decently popular. Usually people put a little bit of gain control if there's plain blue or splashing blue. So Homeward Path's great, because if we lose control of our big Eldrazi, we pretty much lose control of the game. Flamekin Village, we're really not playing any elementals, so this is just comes into play tap, but for 1 and tap it, we can give a creature haste until end of turn, which is good utility. Hammerheim, this is just old badass legends. Taps out a red, or taps to remove all landwalking abilities from target creature until end of turn. Yeah. I just noticed there's actually a typo on this card. Remove all landwalking ability. It should be plural, but you know, we'll give them a pass. And there's a Valakut, pretty standard, and a Forgotten Cave. Just so we have 1 cycle land, I thought it would be fine. And then pretty much the rest are these deserts. I chose this art because well, Mirage just felt thematically like the old school Hour of Devastation, Amonkhet vibe thing, and there was this perfect desert Mirage mountain, so I thought, great. They're like 10 cents each, just load it up on them, and it gives the deck a nice little aesthetic boost, I think. So that's pretty much Neheb. This deck is a lot of fun to play. It's sort of a mid-range power level, which is what I generally shoot for, since I want people to have fun and play their game as well. Yeah, I don't have too much else to say about it. Just keep in mind, obviously, your Afflict is going to trigger his ability, so don't be afraid to swing in and not connect with someone directly. As long as they block, you're going to get 3 mana. And people usually just take the commander damage early in the game because they figure, why would I lose a creature if you're still going to get the mana anyways? You're only getting 1 more. But yeah, I would say play him once early as fast as you can, and then play him carefully, because the tax builds up, and if your mana base is not in accordance with it, you get in awkward situations where you've taken your turn to cast your general, and if your opponents have a better board state, all they have to do is use one removal spell, and they've essentially negated everything you've done for the turn. So it can be problematic, but it's not generally a huge problem. So that's the deck. I hope you guys enjoyed. A bit of a shorter video, a bit of a simpler deck. Yeah, let me know what you think. Let me know what you built. And I hope you were inspired. That's about it. Have a great day, everyone. Peace out.